Alright, good morning, my name's Paul, and this is my channel, Peaceably Watchmaking, and quite new to the whole YouTube thing. I've been doing watchmaking for a fair few years now, and I just decided to knock out a couple of videos. Basically, it's going to detail whatever project I'm working on, or whatever I'm interested in at that particular time, and just go through a few bits that I think are relevant to whatever it is I'm doing. And also there's maybe a lot of things that aren't on YouTube, or that may be difficult to find, or information that's a little bit bitty, should we say. And I've got a bit of a thing for Pogues at the moment. I have got two on the bench, and this one just finished this one the other night, so I thought I'd do a bit of a chat about what I've learned about Pogues in the last couple of months. Of did quite a lot of research, and then picked up ones that interested me, and there's quite a lot of things to talk about with these watches. They seem to have gained popularity really over the last, I would say the last year. The price has definitely gone up. For a mediocre one with aftermarket bits, damaged pieces missing, not running, you're looking at the price being around, if you're lucky, £200. If it's eBay and it's a Sunday evening, which is the prime time to sell on eBay, you're looking at around maybe £325 to £360 for a good one, which is in good condition from a non-watchmaker, so just somebody who's got one lying about for a while. And perhaps you would pay up to a bit. I've seen them go for up to about £550, and then at the higher end of the spectrum, you can pay anything up to 1,200–1,300 quid for the more desirable models. So I'll go through a couple of bits. So this is a 6139 6030R on the dial, which is down this right hand side, and on the case back on the back it will say 6002. If I can just focus in there, it will say 6002 just inside the dial there. So just inside the case back, sorry. So dial themselves is really pretty. I think as watches go, I would say is a particularly nice looking watch. And a lot of people start off with Seikos, and they start their watchmaking adventures with Seikos because the price is quite low and the quality is pretty high, if I'm honest with you, which is quite nice to see. So they're quite a large watch. So size wise, we are looking at 41.4 there, 41.4, and they're also quite tall as well. So from top of lug to top lug is about 46, or 4.6 if you want to go into centimeters. So the dial themselves, then, so you've got this this bezel around the outside, which is held in place, doesn't turn, and the bezel itself holds the crystal in, which is an L-shaped gasket underneath there. I think I've got one here. Let's have a look at that. Let's see if we can focus on this. This is an L-shaped gasket. It's your crystal sits in the gasket, and then the outer bezel will hold that in place. Underneath the crystal and the L-shaped gasket, there's another piece of like a steel ring, and what this does is, there's a steel ring. So there's a couple of different ones of these actually I've noticed. So this sits like this in the top of your case. The L-shaped gasket sits inside this little recess, and underneath on some of them they are stepped on the edge here. And the reason that they're stepped is because this sits over the top of your yellow rotating chapter ring on the inside. And what that'll do is, if you've got the step, it just adds a little bit more room for this to turn a bit more freely. This one hasn't got the step, and you find that some you'll buy, the chapter ring moves a lot more slowly, or it's more difficult to turn or something like that. And I usually find that these are the ones without the step that causes that. So underneath this you'll have your chapter ring, which is the yellow ring in the middle there, and this turns via the crown and the stem. There is a cog actually on the stem, which is ridiculously expensive for what it is, and they get lost frequently, I presume. Luckily I've got a couple of them here. I think I saw one this morning on eBay. The sold listings detailed them at about 50 quid, and it is literally just a tiny little cog. And what you do is when the crown is pushed all the way, and you can turn that, and that'll turn your chapter ring backwards and forwards. Doesn't affect the timing or anything. And that chapter ring is literally a piece of plastic with some cogs underneath it. And I've got another one here. And just forgive the fact that I'm handling this with bare hands, but it already hasn't really been cleaned. This is a chapter ring, and you'll notice it's fully plastic, and on the underside is a load of teeth, and you can hopefully see there this one is particularly dirty, and those teeth are simply turned by the gear on the end of the crown and the stem there. On top of that, you will have a shaped, I'm not going to say gasket, but a shaped kind of spacer or washer, and this just allows you to be able to move the chapter ring, and this gives a little tiny bit of pressure on it, so when you turn it, it doesn't feel totally free to turn. And as I said, that is all held in place by the bezel on the outside here. The case itself, I actually have, as I say, I've actually got more of a couple of these. There is different kinds of cases. So this case here is what's called non-notched. So some of them have a notch. Just let me just get a bit of pegwood to point it out. Some of them will have a little notch just here, which is there's fewer of those about, which automatically in the watch world makes them more desirable. And I also found that there's a couple of different kinds of cases, which is interesting to me because although there is plenty of 6139 variants about, which I won't go into, I'm just going to stick with the Pogue and this gold dial. I actually have two here right now, and this is a pretty bashed up case. And if you look at the side of this case here, this hasn't been polished or anything yet, but there's a distinct difference between the depth of this this angle of the case here and the angle of this case here. If you look where this this angle comes up towards the crown, this one is slightly longer, which is a little bit strange. This case itself is the exact same dimensions, almost the same weight, give or take a little tiny bit. It's the same height, thickness, everything like that, but it is slightly different. Now I'm almost 100% confident that both of these Pogues were owned by the original owner, bought in the 70s, and I purchased them off that original owner. This one here has had a significant amount of servicing. The case back is riddled with service marks. It's been at Seiko twice. There is documented evidence of one of them. This one hasn't really got any service marks. So my decision with this is that this case, I'm happy that they're both original and this is actually off a Pogue. I keep referring to I'm just going to refer to the gold dial as the Pogue. I'm happy that this one isn't been removed from another watch or anything like that, but it's interesting. This one is 1973 and this one is 1977. Obviously maybe the tooling change is a different factory. I think they're both marked as sewer, so I aren't entirely sure. But sticking with the one that I've just cleaned up, I've found through my research is that the finish on the outside point here is brushed in a kind of circular fashion. It's not up or down, left or right, it's kind of circular, which I've tried to emulate when I've polished this one up. These lug parts here seem to remain mirrored, and the rest of the strap, including these parts here, seem to be brushed. Okay, onto the bracelet. So it's called an H-link bracelet. As you can see, the links are in an H shape, and this one is a tapered H-link bracelet, which means that, as you can see, it tapers. Instead of being straight all the way up, it tapers as it gets to the watch. Now I do have a non-tapered version again, which is a bit bashed up, and this is the non-tapered version. And as you can see, exactly what you would expect, it's non-tapered. These seem to have a very light brushed finish from factory. If you look on OEM copies and aftermarket copies and stuff, they all have a light brushing. So this is what I've done with this one. This is my own personal Seiko. I'm happy with how this is. This is how I want this watch to look. And I'll discuss some of the parts of this which some people might not like around the bazaars. And then in the clasp, you have a pressed clasp. For some reason this one's been mirror polished and somebody's decided to etch their initials there, which I'm not entirely sure why, if you can see that on the camera. The clasp itself, I've gone with a mirrored finish. I do sometimes prefer, I do sometimes prefer with Seikos. I like to add a bit of fanciness, and this raised detail of the Seiko company logo, I like to try and keep that mirrored, and then the rest of it brushed, just to be a bit fancy. But for this one, this is how I wanted it. The logo itself is quite nice, it's quite large. So in comparison to some other Seiko watches, if I just find one, you'll find some with it almost looks engraved, and you'll find some that's a lot smaller. So on to the discussion about the features of this watch. So as you can see, the red hand in the middle is turning on this one, and on completion of every minute, a minute on the sub-second hand will tick forwards as well. Okay, so for some reason I read that it's better with mechanical chronos to just leave them running in chrono, so I generally do. I mean, this is a second hand at the end of the day, and it doesn't have a proper second hand. This is your chrono hand. These two pushers on the side will stop and start the chrono, and the bottom one resets it back to 12 o'clock. He says it didn't reset that one. Maybe we'll look at that. I only put this together last night, so there's little bits here and there, and as it starts and stops, it should reset. So this one, as you can see, I need to have maybe a little bit of a play with that sub-second hand and work out. It did reset last night, but you know, these things happen. You do something, and later on it decides to not work. But I mean, this is a 50-year-old watch, so I can take little bits of extra work here and there. So the discussion with this one that I've had along the way, I'll just start this going again just because it gives you something to look at. The discussion I've had with this one is this is a 50-year-old watch. If you look at the condition of the loom, it is very white, and the condition of the loom on the hands is also very white. Is it the condition you would expect a watch to be in after 50 years? I would suggest no, possibly not. There is the kind of sun bleaching of the chapter ring, which is interesting because if you look at this chapter ring, and this is only out of 3 separate versions I have in my possession, there just seems to be massive differences between the chapter rings. So this chapter ring is from another watch. This is from 1977, which is newer but in obviously worse condition. So the initial thing you'll think is, oh, that's definitely an aftermarket chapter ring then. But upon inspection this chapter ring, I would kind of agree it's possibly aftermarket, but I'll go into a bit of a story as to why I'm not sure it is. This chapter ring, if you look at it, the numbers are not quite as in bold, and I don't know if this is going to focus, but the manufacturing process of this chapter ring seems to be kind of made of concentric circles, a little bit like a 3D printer, whereas this one is totally flat when you look at it. Okay, so I'll go on to the dial. So the dial itself, again, doesn't look like it's been in a watch for 50 years, which I can kind of agree with. The sub dial, some of the aftermarket ones will have little circles on them, like a little circle design, or they'll have a black ring around the outside there. The genuine ones seem to tend to seemingly have a kind of, like, if you look, it's like a sunburst effect around the sub dial there, and you do get a little bit of sunburst effect just underneath where the hands are, where the hour wheel will put through the dial, and your hands are going to sit on top. Other things you can look at, and there's plenty of internet posts about this, is the way that the A in Japan is designed. Some of them have an angular top of the A, and some of them have a square top, depending on what the code is on the right or over here. So this one is 6030R. So what's interesting that I think about this one, and I'm sure in the comments people might come back and say it's definitely aftermarket, and regardless of what people think of this watch, I'm really happy with it. I would personally, for my personal use and wearing, I would rather wear this watch than, I'll give an example of another dial that I've got that's definitely genuine, than a worse condition dial, or a worse condition dial that's been reloomed well or badly, I don't really know. So I'm really happy with the condition that this one's in, except for the fact that that sub dial hand decided to stop working this morning, but we'll get to that, that's fine. The loom is very white, as you can see. An up close inspection on a loop is actually put on really well. A lot of the aftermarket ones have rounded corners, it's not done very well whatsoever. Upon inspection of these hands, they match they're kind of under a loop and a microscope. They match the original ones. So the way the lume's been put on, the way that it's it's difficult to describe, but the manufacturing process of putting the lume on his hands matches original ones from Seiko, which I do have. And I'll just get a pair of tweezers. But here's an example of a minute hand, which is off the other one I've got, and you can see that the lume on that one is an orange colour. The water's got to it, whatever, and there's a little bit of wear on the hand on the chrome. Even if you were to clean that off, you would still end up with that scratching and discoloration. So, as I say, this one's been to Seiko a couple of times, and there's a little bit of evidence that came with this watch when I got it, and the back is riddled with service marks. I would like to say that this dial has been replaced by Seiko, and possibly the chapter ring. And the reason being is, it doesn't conform to all the aftermarket issues. Now, the main one that it doesn't conform to is, I've had this watch to bits, and on the back of the dial there is a cord. Okay, so on the back of each dial there is a cord, and that cord should be the first two numbers of the cord serial number on the case back. All right. So let me just test something. Actually, we've got a bit of a flashing because I've got LED lights on. Let me just see if that actually seems to work better. So we'll go with that. As I say, I'm quite new to this. So I'll give you an example of another dial I have here. Okay, so this is definitely an original dial. As you can see, this is quite discoloured. I'm just going to move this out of the way to give this to focus on this. As you can see, this is a discoloured dial. Okay, I'm happy with the fact that it's discoloured. The writing is a little bit less bold. The lume is what you would expect for something that has been around for 50 years. And when I got this watch, it looked like the crystal had been replaced with an acrylic crystal that was very poorly fitted, which is probably letting the dirt and the moisture and the muck and things like that. So this does have a bit of shine to it. Some might say patina, some might say it's knackered, which is fine. So if you notice, compared to the other one there, the writing of Japan and 6030R is a little bit thinner, more finely printed, and the subdial text is also a little bit thinner and also more finely, and what you would expect from Seiko. Now, don't get me wrong, the compared to some of these ones you'll pull from India and things like that, the one I've just moved there is way above the standard you would expect from some of the inverted commas fake Seikos and Mumbai specials, whatever you want to call it. But the code I was talking about on the back of the dial is there, and this isn't well documented. There's a lot of people talking about the code, but there's not really any pictures. So this one has 7N, so I would expect on the back of this case back for this watch the serial number to start with 7N. Now unfortunately it doesn't, it starts with a 7, and that kind of tallies in with the year. I'm just trying to find the case back for it. It does tally in with the year, but it also doesn't tally in with 7N. So the case back for this one actually reads 70. This was on this dial. Now, I would suggest that the person who had this hasn't particularly been changing a lot around for this watch, and there's pictures of him with it on in the 80s and things like that. So he's had it for a long time. So that's an interesting point, that maybe the 7 sometimes matches, but not the N. Not sure. But anyway, so this is another example of the dial. You'll notice on this dial that on the left hand side over here, there's no text. Some dials will say water 70 meter resist, some will say water 70 meter proof. The resist and the proof dials are more valuable because there's less of them, especially the proof ones, because everything was waterproof up until a point when regulations changed and they couldn't say this watch is waterproof, it is now resistant. I mean, 70 meters in today's standards, when you look at high-end watches, isn't waterproof. Water resistant is you go out in it in the rain. Anything that, to me, anything that says less than 100 meters on it isn't any kind of water resistance at all. But I mean, I've been swimming with 20-pound Casios on and they're totally fine. So that's a description of another dial. Some of the aftermarket dials don't have this surround around the day and the date position. This one, as you can see, doesn't have a metal surround. It doesn't have a dark ring around the sub dial. It does have a kind of sunburst effect, and you have a little sunburst effect there on the center of the dial. Okay. The loom, I'm debating what to do with this dial, if I'm honest with you. I have another one that has a better dial on it, but again, I'm not sure if, I don't think the other dial that I have is original anyway. The one I just discussed there, I am in two minds about it, should we say. This one, I'm sure it's original, and the third one, I'm not too sure yet. So I may reloom this, which obviously takes a brave man to reloom a reasonable Pogue dial, but it's not in amazing condition. I might reloom all these in a white, reloom the hands. My intention is probably to either keep this Pogue once the movement's been rebuilt and sorted. I'm not sure what I'm going to keep and what I aren't going to keep. I only need one. I only want one, and the other one that I had a minute ago, this is probably going to be the one that I'm going to keep. Okay, so what's interesting is when you get inside the case, these pushers are held in place by the movement ring, which I'll find an example for somewhere. Here we go. There's a movement ring. Okay, that slips around the movement, and this retains your pushers into the watch. So once you have to press both pushers in, stick this in, let go of the pushers, and they will be retained in their holes. If I just find a pusher, there is a pusher. As you can see, there is a spring as well that goes on there. I've actually just cleaned the two springs that we're lying about, and these springs surround the pusher. You push the pusher in, and it's held in place by this date ring, which is quite a nice little way of doing it. A common issue is that these pushers, the rod is bent. Sometimes with a lot of wear, they do take a lot of force to press the buttons. So I think that the extra force causes a bend here. They're easily straightenable really with anything that this can fit in a pin vise or an anvil or something like that. And then the springs just surround the pushers. There is aftermarket pushers, which I think this potentially has one on it. Out of all the pushers I've got, they were just the nicest two, and they're really easy to change. So should I find another one, I can change it later on. This one I would suggest is an original pusher, and the way you can tell is by the fact that it has an edge on here. It could have been polished out though, it could have been through wear. Some of them have a kind of 45-degree angle on the edge there. What else can we talk about then? So I've got another bezel here actually. So here's another bezel. These obviously come in different really states of damage, I would suggest, due to the age of the watch. Okay, this one has got a little bit more damage around the bottom here, but generally the rest of the bezel is in better condition than this one, only just. But I preferred to not have this bottom damage and just have a general, what I could almost put as an excuse as patina. People get damage and patina seemingly mixed up, maybe on purpose when they're trying to sell a watch, but a little bit of wear kind of goes a long way. This one with the damage on the bottom, I think I'll put with the poorer condition dial and probably sell it after I've serviced the movement, put a new mainspring in, and somebody will no doubt wear that and be happy with that watch. I was very lucky to have the ability to have more than one and make my choice as to what I prefer to have. So that sub-dial has actually decided to work now as well. Somebody's probably screaming at the video shouting, so possibly the reset function needs working out, but again, not an issue. It's interesting, one of the sub-dial hands here as well, I have one that just wasn't working. It refused to work. I could not work out why, and then when I actually nudged it, the little pinion that the sub-dial hand sits on was loose and needed tightening up with a staking set. So if you have one of these with the sub-dial not working, you might find it is working, but the actual hand isn't really got enough friction against the pin it sits in there, and you know, you just got to keep an eye out as to if it's working or not. We'll see these all the time on eBay with issues. One thing I do see them on eBay all the time is with a missing crown. So crowns, we'll discuss that one then. So this is a genuine crown, and the reason, if I can just get it on the camera there, the reason it's genuine is you can see it's actually got a bevel in the middle there. You can see from the light, hopefully, that it's kind of concave. Remember in maths, that's either concave or convex, I can't remember, one of the two, but it has a dip in the middle as you hold it up to the light. So that is a genuine Seiko crown. the two pushers, as you could possibly see, this one has a 45-degree angle, this has less of an angle. I believe this is aftermarket and this is original. This matches up with the other two pushers that I have, because I think the other two are generally just, I'm giving that a bit of a clean because you're just going to see my fingerprints. I think generally the other two pushers that I do have are just worn. It matches the wear of the rest of the case, so I'm kind of happy with that as well. So what else can we discuss? The crown, that's it. So I do have another crown somewhere in my box of tricks. Let me just have another look. Yeah, so here is an example of a non-genuine crown, and as you can see, that doesn't have the kind of dip in the middle of it there. And on the crown, what I was talking about, see this little gear here. I'm just trying to get my, bear in mind, none of these parts have been washed or cleaned, so don't worry about it too much for bare fingerprints. So this gear here is very expensive. It's like 50 quid. It's absolutely ridiculous. Held in place with a spring there, and that's what turns your chapter ring. I think the stems are like 20 quid because it's so common for it to come out. I bought one recently without a crown and a stem, but it was actually for parts. I'm quite happy with that. It doesn't really bother me. A lot of parts on these watches are hugely expensive compared to almost every other Seiko available. We're talking 90 quid for a balance complete. The center chrono wheel here kind of has another cog on the back of it, what would have been the kind of seconds wheel. We're talking 90, £100 for that one wheel. So if you have one that is in really bad condition, you go on eBay and you think, oh, that's all right, that's 250 quid, I can fix that up. If it needs a balance complete, there's any kind of profit or anything you've saved gone. The chrono wheel in the middle says another 100 quid. Crowns, anywhere from for a genuine one, anywhere 50 to £100 for a crown, which is ridiculous, to be honest with you. Pushers, I've seen aftermarket ones for £10 for a pair, genuine ones £25, something like that. The H-link bracelets, again at £50 for the bracelets. What else? You know, the popularity of these, and the fact that people love the fact that this was the first automatic chronograph worn in space by young William Pogue, which his anniversary is actually tomorrow. I think it's the 16th of November tomorrow. Maybe I should have done this on the 16th of November, and then we could tally it in with the Skylab mission. But yeah, my timing isn't as good as what it could be. So what else can we discuss then? So the movements, so there's two movements, the 6139A and B. There exists technical data for the 6139A, but there also exists, technical manual. There also exists a technical manual for the 6139B, but it is in kanji. So the fact that it's in kanji, unless you can read kanji, obviously makes life a little bit more difficult. But there's not a lot of major differences between the two movements to make it a massive issue. So this is an uncleaned movement from whichever watch, the more dirtier of the two, and pretty straightforward Seiko movement. A lot of people will say these are pretty cheap movements, which they kind of are in the scheme of things. If the watch didn't have the prestige of being in space, would it be the price it is? No, I don't think so. You can pick up the black dialed one for maybe 200 quid in really good working order. So the storyline and the space thing has really bumped the price up for this one. The movements themselves is a pretty straightforward Seiko movement, has the same Seiko problems as most other Seikos, which can be the barrel arbor ports wearing. A lot of people will jewel the arbor ports, which is, if you've got a jeweling set, is absolutely fine, you know. A lot of people will also like to play about with other things on it and just add for a little bit of panache. So the bridge is a little bit different for the balance. It covers the entire length of the movement here. As I say, these are expensive, 80-90 quid. The auto works in a one will run you back 60 to 70 quid. Generally the rest of the parts, give or take a few, are average price, you know, sort of £10 or something like that. Barrel completes are obviously not available. The springs are available from Cousins main springs. I think the 1595 as a GRX one fits quite well. It's quite well known. The pushers on the side here, they can get a bit sticky, which causes your bent case pushers and things like that. It's 17 joules. It isn't an amazing movement, I'll be honest with you. I've had some movements out of some watches of a similar era, Longines, Tissot, and they are really pretty to look at. Omega stuff, gorgeous. This is a working movement. This is a movement that you want to last a long time, which I think it will. The date works are pretty straightforward. These are held in with this little C clip here, which conveniently tells you, this is one thing I really like about Seiko's, lift ring upward, which is great, rather than having to open it out and then it's completely knackered. But you just slip a screwdriver in there, pop it off, access to the date works, a couple of retaining plates, both wheels off, and then you can go ahead and service the rest of the movement. A couple of things that are quite nice actually, the dial pins sit in sideways screws like this, as opposed to ones that go and actually screw onto the pin. The pin goes behind the head of the screw, which leads to generally a little bit less wear, I think. But because you have to turn the screw clockwise, obviously to tighten it, as you put the dial feet in, that can sometimes push it away, which means you end up with a little bit of looseness on the dial ring, which is obviously the ring that goes underneath the dial and allows the date and day rings space to move underneath. This one I don't believe has any kind of power in the mainspring. It's not been wound up, it's been off here and on the bench for about 2-3 weeks now, so I'm pretty surprised that this is going. It looks like it's going faster than it is on the video. I think I wound this and stuck it on the time grapher and you're getting about 160 degree amplitude out of it. It just needs a really good screw shout and a clean, and I think what I'm going to do is do a servicing video. There's plenty of them, but it's nice to watch people's services because they are a little bit more complicated than your average Seiko movements. As I say, not particularly a pretty movement. They are workhorses, I would suggest, and at the time when they came out, I would suggest as well that if young Pogue there didn't take it into space, it would just have fallen into obscurity. You also got to remember that you got a sub-dial pinion there, which is very fragile, very difficult to get hold of again. Probably cost you about 20-25 quid again for that wheel, because of the fact that there is not many lying about that people want to break. People like to keep them and build them up themselves, and there's not an amazing amount of spares. Obviously the majority of it is some kind of new old stock you might find about. Cousins pricing, I like Cousins, don't get me wrong, but it's very interesting that any spring that fits into a Seiko is 15 quid, anything that doesn't fit into a Seiko is 7.95. But you know, it's a business and that's how they make money. So that is the discussion on the movement. The actual, I'm just going to stick this back in the dust cover. One thing, it is a top tip as well, what I like to do is on my movement holders I write T and B, which is top and bottom, so when I take off my jewels and the springs from the balance, that's the direction that they go, top and bottom. So for this particular Pogue then, I am very happy that with the way this turned out. It was in a bit of a wreck when I got it. The crystals also are, the original ones are glass. There are plenty of acrylic ones around. They don't tend to fit amazingly on the L gasket and retained by, there's just an acrylic one. They don't tend to fit amazingly well underneath this bezel, which can cause them to turn, let dust in, and I think that's what's happened to that other dial that I just showed you there a second ago. Acrylic crystal. These are still, it's like kind of 13-14 quid. It's just an absolute bog standard acrylic crystal, nothing fancy whatsoever. Crystals for these, mineral glass, you're going to be looking at 30 quid from what I found. It does make a hell of a difference. The profile on them is more flat, with a little bit of a kind of faceted edge there, which is quite nice. So if you're looking for one of these, you got two options really. You can find one, I would find one that is complete, and if you're confident with watchmaking, you get one that is complete, as in it has a crown, the chapter ring turns, and it ticks. If it ticks and everything works but it just stops, that is where I would be looking, okay? Because you'll find yourself in a deep dark hole of parts and pricing when it comes to restoring it. If you have one of your own and or maybe it was your dad's watch and it's a really important piece, then you know people are going to spend the money, because nostalgia and personal connection are really powerful selling tools. People will spend thousands of pounds on what is essentially a piece of metal that tells the time for nostalgia purposes, and I totally get that. I have watches like that myself. I have watches that I've spent more on than it's worth, and that is up to the individual person. I'm all for that. But for these ones, if you're looking to buy it within reason, I would definitely look for one that's complete. If the balance is knackered, you got to be thinking about whether you can do balance work competently and happily. If it's totally knackered and there's a lot missing and the strap's not with it and things like that, then make sure you factor that into the price. I would say in this condition for this watch, I personally, if I put this on eBay and listed it well with good pictures, timed it well, as in finishing on a Sunday night, I would be looking, I think at the moment, between 520, 570. This is going off sold listings for the last week. I watch a lot of Pogues purely so I know what I've got and what I can sell on and what I can't sell on. It's a fact that they are going up. So if you do have one, it's in good condition, then and you can afford to keep it, then keep it. I definitely would, because it's only going to go up, I think, as these get broken and less parts are available and things like that. So I personally do have a couple of parts that I have on eBay, and sometimes you can find that these things can pay for themselves if you end up with a couple of them. So that's the kind of my little video, my little guide on Pogues. Is it a nice watch? Yes. Is it worth the 600-700 quid you pay for a really expensive one? Yeah, I think so. I think it will. Some of the fancy watch sites you'll see, like GQ and things like that, they'll be, oh, here's a Pogue, you should get this one, you know, because it's only £1,000, you know. And in the days of people spending 17, 18, 25 grand on a Yachtmaster and rolling about with a Rolex, maybe that's not a lot of money to a lot of people, but a lot of the Seiko collectors are the person off the street, you know, and we like value and collectability and something that looks pretty as well. So I think I've just about covered everything that I'd like to cover. If anyone has any questions, please put it in the comments. I'd appreciate. Oh, just throwing things all over the place. There is one thing I'd like to cover as well, actually. These little clips that sit here at the bottom of the bracelet. So these little pieces of trim, as it were, these can get bent out of shape very easily, and these also aren't very amazing to be able to find. They can be scratched, they can be in poor condition. These little arms get bent, which doesn't retain your bracelet, and they can be very difficult to tighten without completely damaging this out of whack. If you notice, this one has got a slight little bit of bend or damage there. I might be able to get that out. I probably won't try, because I have a tendency for making these worse. The other side is fine as I move the light. So these are quite difficult to get hold of, the original Seiko ones at least. You can get the bracelets from Uncle Seiko or whatever his name is, you know. I understand they're very good. I don't have any myself. I have a lot of Seikos, and they've got a combination of straps and original bracelets, things like that. I might be tempted by an Uncle Seiko, but I don't know. People get very, very antsy about the word aftermarket parts, that's 2 words, with these watches, and they go, oh, it's a Franken watch, oh, it's a watch made of different watches. Well, you know, if you're trying to find I think any watch really, with an age that we're looking at here in the sort of 70s. I have a lot of 70s watches. That's my little panache. That's what I like. There's no guarantee that all these parts are correct to the watch, but you can do what you can do. So as I say, the dial on these, this one has 3N on the back of the dial, and I believe that we have 3N on the back of the case back there, if I can just see it. Yeah, so the serial starts with 3N, so I'm happy with that. People get very disconnected from reality as to why sometimes we have watches, I think, because sometimes they're pretty, sometimes you really appreciate what they're like. Some people like to have a watch because it says Rolex on it. Some people like to have a watch that demonstrates originality, and that's totally fine. Everybody has different ways of collecting and working, things like that, and I go for that. I'm quite happy with that. That's fine, but you'd be prepared to spend the money if you want absolutely original, guaranteed, all parts original watch. And I guarantee it does not look like that. It doesn't have this kind of lume colour. It doesn't have the beautiful hand lume colour. It's a difficult one to say. You could be lucky and find a watch that's been sat in a drawer for 50 years. But anyway, thanks for watching. If you have watched, I don't have many subscribers or views at the moment, so anything is a bonus. I'm not here to sell anything. I'm not here to persuade anybody to do anything. I just enjoy watchmaking and I enjoy my Seikos, and I thought I'd give it a go at sharing it with you guys. So thank you very much for watching, and if you are looking for a Seiko or you are looking for a Pogue, then good luck. And if you have any questions, especially about parts, then please drop me a message. Thank you very much.